This is Mayor Peter Simmons welcoming you to Bonita Springs City Hall this evening, where you can see we're getting set up here for a voter registration drive. We're working with Lee County Supervisor of Elections, Tommy Doyle. We're reaching with the Hispanic Get Out the Vote, and we're working with a lot of different organizations. We're also working with the Bonita Springs Diversity Outreach Committee and just a lot of groups of people coming together here. We have Deputy Mayor Bill Ribble here, Councilman Fred Forbes, and some others, and we're just happy to reach out and get people registered to vote that may not have registered to vote in the past, and breaking down some barriers and getting people involved that traditionally aren't involved in the political process, and we're looking forward to a very successful evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening. My name is Jesse Purdon. I have the honor of being the chairman of the Outreach Committee for Bonita Springs. Tonight we have a very special event going on here at City Hall. We have the Hispanic Voter Pack of Southwest Florida. We have the folks from the Supervisor of Elections and our committee and community members so that they can learn about the importance of voting and understand the registration process so that they can be involved in the important election that's coming up this November. We are really excited to be doing this event because, as you may or may not know, 1 in 4 Floridians are of Hispanic descent. 22% of Venetians are of Hispanic descent, yet they vote in a very small number. This committee, part of our mission, is ensuring we get to at least change that piece on our little piece of the world. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Actually, this isn't truly a meeting, folks. This is a community event where we actually are not going to be discussing any pertinent business to the Outreach Committee specifically. Today we're going to focus on something that's even bigger than that. But before we get into that, I'd like to have Councilwoman Carr come up and lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, ma'am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Carr. Now, before we actually get into the meeting, we have a somber moment that we're going to take as a group. I'm sure many of you are aware, and if you are not aware, we did have a Fort Myers police officer who was shot in the line of duty this weekend. It's a very unfortunate situation when you have folks who put their life on the line every day to ensure that we're safe. And this guy's 29 years old. He's younger than me. He's younger than all of you guys, right? And he showed up to work, and he didn't get to go home from work, and he's still in the hospital. So, with that being said, I'd like to start with a moment of silence for that Fort Myers police officer. Thank you very much. And I also, on that note, I did see something today on social media. They're going to be doing a fundraiser for him and his family. Our organization, and I'm sure some of the other organizations here as well, will push that out. And I believe it's up in Cape Coral. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you all for coming today. This is a big event for us because this committee is really a committee that was started to outreach, you know, a large portion of our community that isn't currently politically engaged. You know, we have, it's not just Hispanics, so don't get it twisted. It's not just Hispanics. It's people who are not engaged in the political process, who aren't taking their seat at the table. And as far as Hispanics go, we have 22% of those folks in Bonita Springs are Hispanic. 1 in 4 Floridians happen to be of Latino descent. 1 in 4. Think about that. And the rate at which they vote is so small. This is an opportunity, and what will be the first of something that I believe our city will carry on long after this committee is over and gone, which will be a constant effort to try to engage the Bonita Springs community in being involved in their local government and always having a seat at the table. As you know, this committee has been a voice for the people of Bonita Springs when they didn't know where they could go. They came to us, and then we went to the mayor, and things happened for him. So with that being said, I'm very pleased and honored to be part of this event with you today. So how this will work is I'm going to call up the mayor of Bonita Springs, Peter Simmons, and he's going to do a welcome on behalf of the city, and then we're going to move on to our Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Tommy Doyle, who was gracious enough to join us here today as well. And then we're going to have an excellent presentation from the Hispanic Voter PAC by Ms. Carmen Salome, and it's going to be beautiful. I know it's going to be beautiful because, you know, everything that, we don't do roll call for this, everything that Carmen attaches herself to normally turns out really well, okay? So with that being said, and then after that, we're going to have a voter education presentation. And after the presentation, we're actually going to do a mock election. And we will have you all out of here no later than 7:30. I can promise you that, no later than 7:30, okay? So, with that being said, Mr. Mayor, the show's yours.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome for being here tonight. I've been mayor just over 2 years now, and when we first moved to Bonita Springs from Florida in 2009, the first thing that I did after closing on the house was buy a bicycle at Engel's Bike Shop, so that's how I got to meet Councilman Mike Gibson. And then I went to find a good barber shop, as you can see. I'm not afraid of the military cut, neither is Mel over there. We don't have the same barber, though, but on a serious note, the barber shop was on Old 41, a Hispanic barber shop on Old 41, and some of you have heard this before, but there's a lot of new folks with us tonight. And so formed a relationship, started talking, went there once a month, literally, to get my hair cut. And then I ran for city council in 2012. And as I was running, I was asking questions about the Hispanic and Latino community. And they said, no, nobody's ever reached out to us. Nobody's, you know, City of Bonita Springs incorporated in 2012. So I said, well, that's a bit odd. And when I ran for mayor in 2016, had some support because I had been to the soccer fields, and I'd been to the soccer fields not just at election time, right, Mel? I'd been down and been engaged with the community somewhat. I don't want to overstate it, somewhat, but had some nice friendships. And then when I won as mayor of Bonita Springs, the first thing, the first piece that I introduced up there, I said, we need a committee that is representative of the community, of the city of Bonita Springs, that isn't one of the existing standing committees where people can have a voice that are underrepresented, as Jesse said. So we are going into our second year now with this committee. I call it the Diversity Outreach Committee. The formal name is the Outreach Committee. We have, and then of course I show up and say, well, let's do a Cinco de Mayo party. Well, Peter, that's only Germain in Mexico. So we've had what we call Fiesta for 2 years now. There's been a lot of outreach between this event, but there's a lot of cultures and ethnicities represented at this event. And we just, the second annual was actually May 5th this year, as it turned out. But we've done a good amount of outreach. We've covered a lot of ground in literally a year and a half. Everybody that's on this board, we've had some passionate debates. Very, very passionate. We've argued about beer trucks, so that proves we're a real committee. We've had disagreements, and for anybody that doesn't believe me, Laura Taylor can attest to that. But we have a passionate group. We have a lot of people on city council. We have a lot of people in the community asking questions because they don't understand, because what's going on? This has never happened in Bonita Springs. But we have an all-star team up here. There is Lester. There's two additional members that aren't here this evening. Lester, who is of African-American descent, very involved in the community and does a lot of traveling, so and has a son that lives in Indiana, so he's not here with us tonight. And Juan Romero, who along with Mel Bursino and Mel's father is very, very active and has been for years in the soccer leagues in Bonita Springs, and just are backbones of the community, and very involved. And quite frankly, when after the hurricane, the soccer fields weren't open, and you know, as we did some shuffling around this summer, but you know, there's a lot of families in the community that can't afford to go up north. They can't afford to go on vacation. They may or may not go down to the beach, but the soccer fields is a very integral part of their world and of their community. So with Jesse's help and the committee's help, we got the soccer fields reopened, and then because of the damage that happened during the hurricane, we actually worked with Lee County to get space up at the Lee County facilities this summer, as we're going to actually completely shut down the soccer fields this summer and resod them. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. There's a lot going on in the community. There's a lot going on simultaneously with what the city of Bonita Springs is doing downtown on Old 41. In fact, Flint and Doyle is going to move a historic building for us here coming up pretty soon. And so we are moving forward in a lot of different ways, but we're also embracing our history of the past. And we tried to do this a year ago, but then the hurricane came and the event got canceled. So I want to thank everybody that's here this evening and the outreach that the community is doing. Onward and upward, everybody. This is a great team. Delighted and honored to be a part of this, and just can't thank you enough. And I want to now ask our Supervisor of Elections, Tommy Doyle, to speak as well, and we're very honored that Tommy's here tonight. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Jesse, are you sure we're going to get out here at 7:30? You give him the mic? Anyway, as I heard Peter talk about passion, and one thing I have to tell you, I probably have the passionate election outreach team in the country, in the state, in the country. And I want to introduce them. Artemis is the director, Artemis Kale, and her team members, David Fair and Juan Diaz. And they direct 15 Patriots. In fact, we have Patriots tonight in North Fort Myers doing a registration drive. But what we have done, we've emphasized education over registration, because we can register all the voters we want, but they're not gonna vote unless we get them educated on the issues, on the local issues mostly, and that's what we're emphasizing on, and they're doing a great job. I'm just here. I'm just a pretty face on the poster, but they're the one that do all the work, and I really thank them and I appreciate them, and I don't know if there's much more I can say about that, but we're getting ready for a big election. Our primary election is August 28th. There's a lot of issues on there for Democrats, for Republicans, for nonpartisans. Big school board races going on. Then after that, we're gearing up right away for a huge general ballot with 13 amendments. And we have brought brochures with all the entire wording of those amendments that you can look over, because the summary amendment on the ballot is going to be very convoluted. It's not going to make sense, and you're not, if you don't read these, you're not going to know what to vote for. So educate yourself and get out and vote.
Thank you very much. Thank you, distinguished committee and Mayor and Mr. Doyle for collaborating together to put this event on for the community of Bonita Springs. I'm Carmen Salome. Thank you very much. Carmen Salome, and I am the Vice Chair of the Hispanic Vote Southwest Florida chapter. We're a brand new chapter, opened up about February of this year. We've gotten, folks are noticing us, and we rolled up our sleeves, and we are running. We are running, trying to do everything we can to help inform and educate the community at whole, but specifically the Hispanic voter, on how to get engaged in the process. So the mission, our mission is to educate, inform, and engage the community with the goal of increasing Hispanic voter outcome and their political participation. And the vision is for all Hispanics to exercise their right to vote. And how do we do this? Well, we do it first of all through our message, para prosperar hay que votar. To prosper, you have to vote. We get this message out through social media. We are out there on Facebook, Instagram. We are tweeting. We are any which way we can get that message out there. We're casting a very wide net. There are a couple of public service announcements. They were made on the other coast, but they are very generic and general in getting the information out, and we have those embedded here in this presentation, so you'll be able to see. And you'll be seeing those as the voting, as we get closer to elections. We have monthly community leaders meetings. We just had one last week, and Mr. Doyle was our speaker. This is an opportunity to get our elected official up close and personal with the community, one-on-one, learn about the office and how it affects you as a voter and a taxpayer. We also do this through candidate forums and these types of educational seminars. And these voter education seminars in partnership with our supervisor of elections. Here's the first public service announcement.
Este es un día muy importante para la democracia en los Estados Unidos. Llegó el momento de elegir. En este momento, millones de...
Hijo, ¿para dónde vas?
A intentar hacer lo que ustedes no hacen, votar.
No lo pienses más. Su futuro depende de ti. Somos un gigante dormido. Despierta. Sal a votar.
You saw two logos there. Cubans for Better Florida is actually where the Hispanic vote was founded. It started first as Cubans First for Better Florida, and from there it morphed into the Hispanic vote from the other coast, and now we are the second chapter in the state. It is a state PAC. So let's talk a little bit about Hispanic diversity in Florida. You know, you will also notice that the numbers here are reflective of the 2010 census. So these numbers we expect have drastically changed. We'll find those out in a little bit, of course. So the findings from the most recent U.S. Census Bureau and Pew Hispanic Center research shed a fascinating light on the customs and trends of the nation's fastest growing minority and how it's influencing the demographic and economic impact of Florida. Hispanics now make up almost 1 in 4 Floridians, as Jesse said earlier. Hispanics are the largest minority in Florida. They represent about 20% of the total population of Florida. Hispanics make up about almost 14% of the active registered voters in Florida, and they account for, as you can see there, 11% registered Republican, 13.5% registered as Democrats, and 20% no party affiliates. And again, these numbers, we will see them change drastically. Hispanics expressing no party affiliation increased by 38%, but you're going to see that in all groups, because I think as the political divide happens, more and more people tend to fall away from political parties. Okay, so 4.22 million Florida residents are Hispanic, but they're not evenly distributed throughout the state, with a huge portion of them, of course, living in the Miami-Dade and Broward, Palm Beach area, as well as the Orange counties. Southwest Florida, here in Lee County, we're seeing those numbers also go up. The state's Hispanic population grew by 57% between in those 10 years, 2000 and 2010, and we're going to see those numbers get bigger. Cubans make up 1.2 million, having been the political and social face of the Hispanic Florida since 1960, and they're still the largest Hispanic group in Florida. Puerto Ricans now number 725,000, and I think with the hurricane of last year, we will see those numbers jump drastically. Future in and outflows, of course, of Hispanic depend on what's going on around the world in these Latin American countries. So there's a huge influx of Venezuelans coming into the Miami area. Puerto Rico, huge influx of Puerto Ricans coming into Southwest Florida, Florida in general, many landing in that Orlando and Orange County area. Hispanic or Latino? How many of you have heard that? I get that all the time. What is it, Hispanic or is it Latino? Well, personally, I got to tell you, I like to be called a Latina. Okay? Many times I say I'm an American of Puerto Rican descent. Okay, but I like the word Latina, and that is the way I grew up. I grew up north, and when you are from that New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut area, you are a Latino. Here, I became Hispanic when I came here to Southwest Florida. The preference is, of course, is an East Coast, West Coast phenomenon. Hispanic was the preferred term along the East Coast residents. Latino preferred term along the West Coast residents. Hispanics are believed to be from Spanish-speaking countries, and Latinos, of course, from Latin American countries. Okay, so why aren't more Hispanics getting out to vote? Voter apathy is largely to blame for the poor turnout. There are no significant logistical barriers because, as we know, voting has gotten easier to do. You can do it by mail now. But many of Hispanics just have a lack of interest in it. Young independents and South American voters are the least likely of Hispanics to vote and show up at the polls. And I think those groups, especially if they're coming in from South American countries where there is not a lot of love for their government, as you know, there's a lot of problems with many of the governments, they already come thinking their vote won't matter. Hispanics have a low degree of ethnic solidarity, as only 45% think it's important to support Hispanic candidates. Hispanics have weak loyalties to their respected political parties. Only 40% vote for a candidate based on them being Republican or Democrat.
I keep voting for you, white guy.
We are after
Andres and I have, you know,
the
opposite persuasion.
the best candidate for the office. Okay, so how do they get their information? Television is the best method for communicating with Hispanic voters, right? Few Hispanic voters prefer obtaining political information through the mail. I think that's true with anybody. I mean, you know, Tuesday when I go to the mailbox and I see the junk mail, it goes right into the circular file. Email is preferred by less than 10% of voters. You would think that. And radio is not a major source for political information for Hispanics. So most of their information tends to come from television. Okay. Many Hispanic candidate support. Many Hispanics think that it's not important at all, okay, to support a Hispanic candidate. U.S.-born Hispanics overwhelmingly believe that a candidate does not have to be Hispanic to do a good job. And very few think it's important to support a Hispanic candidate. Elements of non-participation. Many of the Hispanics are not interested in elections or politics for many reasons. When I was running last year, a couple of years ago, this is what I heard. I don't have time to vote. I don't like the candidates. My vote won't matter. That's the biggest one. My vote won't matter. I remember speaking to someone who was, you know, a very educated person. He was in IT, and he said, what if I pick the wrong person? That's why I won't vote. He's afraid to pick the wrong person. I don't want to stand in long lines, which we don't have to do that anymore. It comes right to the mailbox. And that's the kind of information we want to make sure to get out to our community. And I don't have transportation. It's even easier now to vote. There is no reason. I tell folks there's no reason not to. Hispanics are primarily concerned with pocketbook issues. Okay? We are concerned with the economy, with jobs, having enough jobs and having a job, and with educating our kids. Okay, here's the second public service announcement.
Una gran movilización para votar este día. Esperamos que la comunidad hispana se levante y asista a las urnas. Somos más del 16% de la población de los Estados Unidos. Aproximadamente 48 millones de personas, 22 millones de hispanos tienen el poder para ejercer su derecho al voto.
¿Y tú? Eres uno de ellos.
Hoy será un día crucial.
Tenemos el poder para elegir. Somos un gigante dormido. Despierta, sal a votar.
The two logos there. Those, if I am not mistaken, those ads, as well as the study that where you see a lot of the numbers that were cited was a study that was bought and paid for by the Cubans for a better Florida. But now it's time to update those numbers, right? So I think these numbers, this is fairly recent from Mr. Doyle's office. In Lee County, 113, a little more than 113,000 Hispanic residents, or 18% of the total population. And the total registered voters is over 434,000. 42,002 Hispanic registered to vote, and which is almost 10%. Now, in those numbers, I always say this, it may be more, because many people do not identify by their ethnicity. So in the number that when you see white, there may be tons more in there. The we're going to talk about constitutional officers, but I think a lot of this group already knows who those are and what their process is. So I may be cutting it short right here, but this is where so if it gets a little repetitive, please let me know. But in the United States, and each state and territory has constitutional officers who lead federal, state, and county governments in the United States. And these officers may be elected or appointed depending upon the position. So this is the informative piece for our grassroots, for the community, is where we would break down the different offices that they are would be voting for at any particular ballot. Many don't realize that the importance or that we are a closed primary state. Many people just don't realize that you have to be registered in a party to vote. People don't realize that they vote for judges, lieutenant governors, and governors. In Lee County, we have 3 state senators and 4 state representatives. We have those races, state representative races are coming up this year, both in August and then again in November. We have 5 Board of Commissioners that are elected at large. That means everybody votes for their representative. These are partisan, unfortunately, they're partisan, so you have to be registered in a party to vote. This is what our beautiful county is divided and looks like. And you'll notice also that I believe the school board lines mimic the county commission lines as well. School board has now 7. They have 2 out at large. They have the 5 that are single member district and the 2 at large. These are our constitutional officers, of course, the clerk, the property appraiser, the public defender, the sheriff. We have a huge state attorney race happening right now that is really muy caliente. So I encourage all of the community to please come out and vote in that one. We want the right person for the job there. We have our tax collector and, of course, our supervisor of elections. And our supervisor of elections is the only constitutional officer who is nonpartisan. So everyone votes in that race. As well as our school board members, they are also nonpartisan. Everybody votes in that race, in those races. And this year we have, I believe it's 1, 4, 5, and 6 up for election. And that's happening in less than 35 days. So it's very, very important that folks get out and learn about who those candidates are. Hispanic Vote has sat through over 20 hours of candidate interviews, candidate endorsement interviews, over 50 candidates from both Lee and Collier counties. And we've actually come up with an endorsement card, and that is available to the community as well. If you are unable to meet the candidates yourselves, we've kind of helped you there by doing some homework, and we are happy to share that information with the community. This is what the school board districts look like now. We have, I believe it's, we also have a circuit court judge, and Collier County also has a county court judge. We also interviewed them as well, and we have made some recommendations to the community there. Let me just say that all our court nominees, all the candidates running for court are stellar. So it's almost like you can't go wrong there. County court judges. Oh, okay, Bonita. does Bonita have any, oh, your elections are next year, right? In 2019, March 2019. So as soon as we're done in November, guess what we'll be doing? Gearing up for March.
Do this again.
Cape Coral also will have their municipal elections in 2019. Theirs kind of mimic what's happening now, so it'll be August, I think, August and November as well. City of Sanibel also. Mr. Doyle, will all the municipalities next year?
He says that-
No, we
he
just
said
had
20,
elections in 2018.
Yeah, we
We'll
just
have it
had
in
it.
2020 again.
Okay, so, but in 19 then is Cape?
And you got 4-year terms?
In Bonita, 4-year
Okay.
terms, yes.
Oh my God.
And we have Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, and
Cape.
in March.
Oh, okay.
Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, and Estero.
Oh, yeah,
And then-
there you go.
Then we have Cape Coral and Fort Myers in August, primary. And
Yeah, these are full-time jobs, trying to keep up with all of this. There's also special districts. You know, I don't know if many of the Hispanic voter realizes your tax dollar goes towards the mosquito control. It goes towards fire district. It goes towards Captiva, erosion prevention. So these are all nonpartisan elections, community members running for these positions, helping to also, manage that for the community. And here's our third and final public service announcement. This one is my favorite.
Llegó la hora de honrar su sacrificio. Ejerce tu derecho. Somos un gigante dormido. Despierta. Sal a votar.
Compelling. So for the residents, for the people of Bonita Springs and maybe even in Lee County that might be watching this program, and they go, okay, so what's next? How do I get involved? This is what I say. Para prosperar, tiene que votar. If we want to go anywhere, we have to vote. If we want to, we have to have a seat at that decision-making table, and this is how we do it. Our voice needs to be heard. So I want you to get involved in the voting process. How do you do that? You can call Mr. Doyle's office. You can contact any one of us on social media. We are social media butterflies. We are out there. Just Google us. You'll find our name. And I would be happy to sit with you and talk to you about the process. How you register, where to vote, where do I find candidate information, where do I find your endorsement information. So I'd be happy to do that. Make an effort to meet local officials, and we help you there monthly by having these community leader meetings. They are held right now the third Thursday of the month. We are holding them at Cantina Laredo. We are a small group, so we have a small room off to the side. We have some awesome appetizers, and the conversation is always spirited and engaging. Attend town hall meetings and candidate forums. There's several. I think there's 3 tonight. There's 3 candidate meetings, meet and greets tonight. So, and those, again, are in the newspaper. You can Google and find out. They're on social media. And you can get a hold of Hispanic Vote, and we will certainly give you that information as well. Volunteer in your community. That's where a board like yours comes in, where we want to see more a reflection of the community and all of those boards at the city level. So those are city advisory boards, and we encourage residents to approach members of the diversity board or the mayor and say, listen, I want to serve, and I have a skill that I would love to serve the city with as a volunteer. And then take every opportunity to voice your opinion through the vote. Now, I know I ran through that pretty fast. I practiced with my husband, who said to me, slow down, you're a little bit too fast. But I felt that the crowd was pretty engaged anyways. Are there any questions that I may answer for you? If not, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Next up, we're going to start the portion of the meeting which we're calling the voter education portion of the meeting, and this is going to be run by the Supervisor of Elections. So come on up, folks.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is David, as Mr. Doyle stated earlier, and I am part of the Community Education Services team. So as Mr. Doyle stated, our job is to make sure that we get out into the community and educate the public about voting. And I have to say, ever since I've joined this department, my desire to vote has increased. I can say that in high school, voting wasn't important to me. And now I understand the high schoolers when I go and educate them and their lack of interest in it. Well, a good amount of them. So it gives me an opportunity to reach out to them and educate them. Now, the presentation I'm going to do with you guys today is the presentation that we do whenever we have a community event, whether it be at a school, an elementary school, a middle school, a high school, a college, or if it be at a community event such as this, or an opportunity to meet with community groups, we do this presentation. And a lot of this information, I feel like we have a room full of experts. So you're going to know this, so bear with me on this. In fact, I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to get some participation on behalf of all of you to see how informed you are on these topics, okay? All right, so let's go ahead, and if we could actually, where's the clicker at? Do we have the clicker? Perfect. I'll go ahead and head to my next slide. Here's some of the things I will cover with you today. We're going to talk about some of the amendments. We will talk about the National Voting Rights Act. We'll talk about the qualifications for voting in the United States and the state of Florida, types of elections that take place, methods of voting. We'll talk about the precincts and poll workers, and we'll talk about some of the numbers for the registered voters in Lee County. Now, briefly, I'm going to play a video for you, and it's going to have some people who share some great stories. We know that in the beginning, around 1700s, not everyone was able to vote. So this video is going to speak a little bit about that. We'll talk about the video, and we'll continue with the presentation.
America's founders fought for the right to elect their own leaders, so much better than having a king. Now our precious right to cast a ballot is protected for all time in the United States Constitution, right? Right?
The Constitution does not contain any explicit and affirmative guarantee of the right to vote. It's simply not in there.
What? We don't have the right to vote? Isn't voting what makes a democracy a democracy? Turns out that back in 1787, when the U.S. Constitution was drafted, the 13 colonies each had different ideas about voting. And in order to get all the colonies to agree to sign the Constitution, the Founding Fathers deliberately left out anything about voting rights and just left it up to the states. Nice work, guys. Because today, there are over 7,000 local jurisdictions inside 50 states and 5 U.S. territories that regulate and administer the vote in their own ways. And the problem with so many local election standards is that some states used to be like Alabama before 1965.
I was born in Greensboro, Alabama, and I lived here all my life. We went to the courthouse the first and third Mondays of each month trying to register to vote. Every time they would ask ridiculous questions, recite the third line of the second paragraph of the Constitution. And in a minute you say, well, I don't believe I need, so you don't pass, you just get on out.
And it took enormous fortitude and courage for Teresa Burrows and others to sort of stand up to those forces. I've been in Alabama for 25 years, and each year we celebrate the sacrifices that Alabamians made on Bloody Sunday.
Bloody Sunday, March 7th, 1965, when police attacked unarmed civil rights protesters, was a tipping point in the struggle for equal voting rights for African Americans.
Bloody Sunday led directly to the enactment of the Voting Rights Act, which was the broadest protection of voting ever in our country.
The Federal Voting Rights Act finally enforced the 15th Amendment, which made it illegal to deny the right to vote based on race.
The first time I voted was for the governor. I never will forget that. It was a joy for me. I'm a registered voter. How about that?
Over the next 4 decades, African Americans would register and vote in ever-increasing numbers.
The impact of the Voting Rights Act was extraordinary. If you look at the presidential elections of 2008 and 2012, you see a dramatic consequence, which is the election of Barack Obama, which would not have been possible with the electorate that existed in the United States in 1964. Barack Obama's margins came from minorities and from young voters.
And we shouldn't forget that those young people wouldn't have been allowed to vote if it weren't for the 26th Amendment, signed into law by Republican President Richard Nixon. That reduced the age of voting to 18 rather than 21. Yes, much of the history of voting rights has been about the expansion of suffrage, but in recent years, citing potential voter fraud, a number of states began enacting voter ID laws. Back in 2012, you could cast a ballot in states such as Texas, North Carolina, Alabama, and Wisconsin without a government ID. But starting in 2016, you might not be able to vote unless you have the time and the resources to get the required documents. Okay, so what if you need a government-issued ID to cast a vote? Who doesn't have a photo ID? Well, 11% of the voting population, that's who, 21 million people. Judges struck down some of these ID laws, and some states are making it easier to register and to vote. But at the same time, other states are cutting down on early and same-day registration. Certain districts are reducing the number of polling places and cutting down on early voting hours.
It's partly partisan. It's about power. If you can restrict the number of people who vote, it might be easier for your party, your candidate, to get elected. People have to be very motivated, very committed to voting in their local communities in order to fully realize their right to vote.
Voting matters. Elections matter. That's why there has been so much conflict over it.
Now you know that the Constitution doesn't guarantee that voting will be easy, and that new laws and budget cuts make voting harder for some people in some states. So, what should you do? Know the voting rules and polling places in your town, and work to change the laws if they bother you. But to do that, you've got to make sure that you can vote. It might be harder than you think.
Alrighty, so very simple video, but a very powerful video at the same time. And this is usually the portion where I discuss now the history of voting. And I'm sure you folks are all the experts on the history of voting. So back in around 1700s time, by someone raising their hand, who were the only people that were allowed to vote? There was like 3 qualifications that you had to have to be able to vote around 1700s time. There we go. And does anyone remember the age in that time? Anyone remember the age? So you had to be a Caucasian male or a white male. You had to own land. And then, does anyone know the age? 21. You had to be 21 years of age. So these were the qualifications, and so this is the point of a presentation where I try to make it personal for every person. And whether if we're at a school, I try to say, hey, if we were all going to school together, and let's say the principal said, hey, we're going to change the uniform, we're going to vote on changing the uniform. And the uniform is going to be a lime green shirt, pink shorts, and blue sneakers. And then I ask everyone, how many of you would want to vote on that? And of course, everybody raises their hand because I don't think, well, most people don't want to wear that uniform, correct? And so they'll say, well, if we went according to the rules from the 1700s, not all of you would be able to participate. In fact, most of the people in the room would not be able to participate. And so this is where we try to understand the frustration in that time. Now, in that time, they weren't voting on a uniform such as that, but they were voting on issues that affected everyday life. And I don't know about you, but if something's going to affect my everyday life, I at least want to be able to have a say in it. And so that's what the people in that time were thinking. So this is where a movement got started. Okay, how can we make it equal? How can it be equal among all people to be able to vote? So then there came an amendment. And this is the question I have for all of you. What amendment came that stated that the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude? Now, you guys are good. That's correct. The 15th Amendment. And this was ratified in 1870. 15th Amendment. I did hear the 15th. I'm not sure if somebody said something else, but that was the 15th Amendment. Ratified in 1870. Correct. It was in the video. And it was in the first slide that I put. So that ratified in 1870, of course, like I said, this stated that the right to vote shall not be denied based on race or color. Very important, a step forward in our country. Very good. Then another amendment came, and this allowed for women to be able to vote. What amendment was this? Ooh.
19.
Correct. 19th Amendment. 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920. So in 2020, women will celebrate 100 years that they've had the privilege or the right to vote. Now, if we actually think about that, 100 years is not that long that they've had the privilege of voting. But again, this was a step forward in our country. This is now a privilege that women have and enjoy. So this is great. Then another amendment came, and I believe I do have the slide in here, but if I don't, I'm going to quiz you anyways. This amendment changed the voting age. There were those that were being drafted to go into war, and they said, why is it that we are old enough to die, but we are not old enough to vote? Because again, the voting age was 21. Does anyone remember what amendment changed the voting age?
26.
Not the
1971, President Nixon.
Okay, does anyone remember the amendment? I think I heard it.
26?
26th Amendment, correct. And I hope I have it in here. It should be in here. Let's see. Nope, I didn't, but you guys got it right anyways. The 26th Amendment changed the voting age, and this is awesome. This allows for now the 18-year-olds to be able to vote. And of course, those that were being drafted in that time, now they felt as though they were being treated fairly. Why was it that they were old enough to die but not old enough to vote? So that was a great amendment. Then we had the National Voting Rights Act, because if you paid attention to the video, the African-American woman who shared her story stated that although we had the 15th Amendment and the 19th Amendment, she would try to go and register on the first and third Mondays of the month, I believe she said. And every time she would go to try to register, they would ask her ridiculous questions. Does anyone remember what they asked her in order to be able to register? That's right, a portion of the Constitution you had to recite. Now, put yourself in her shoes. Imagine how nervous you are. You know the tensions that are going on with, you know, discrimination taking place, and someone asks you to quote a certain part of the Constitution. I would not be able to do it. Okay, I really only know the first part of the Constitution, right? I don't think any of us, does anyone have the Constitution memorized?
First 3 words.
No? I guess we got to work on that, right? So we need to memorize the Constitution. But she did not have the Constitution memorized, and of course that was a difficult question, and that's why they asked it. They knew she could not answer it. So we had discriminatory practices that were taking place, poll taxes, literacy tests, all which were unfair. So we had the National Voting Rights Act, which occurred after Bloody Sunday, as we saw in the video, and this outlawed the discriminatory voting practices that were adopted in many southern states. So this was important. And the part I like to highlight from this is in the bottom corner, it says Congress amended and extended this act for 25 years on July 27, 2006. What does that mean? In 2031, again, they need to look at the National Voting Rights Act to ensure that all states are still complying with this. Because as stated on the video, some of the people who were talking were saying there could be states that are subtly trying to set up ways to keep certain people groups from voting. So this is important, and this is where I encourage the students, I encourage the adults, make sure that you are paying attention to what is going on in our country. Stay up with the current events. Find out what our country is doing, the decisions that they're making, so that you can be part of it. If you are able to be proactive in something, you're able to vote against something, then you want to do that, but you're not going to be able to do that if you don't pay attention. And again, I was one of those people who did not pay attention. I pay attention now. So this is where I encourage that. But that's part of our history, and it's very simple, it's very quick, but it's very powerful, it's important. It's important that we understand where we've come from. The people who came before us, I especially at this point, I make sure that I state that I didn't have to do anything to get my right to vote. It was handed to me. I'm able just to get a registration form. I didn't have to do any of the protesting. I didn't have to put my life at risk for any of this. It was handed to me. And if we compare to other countries, there's other countries where citizens still can't vote. There's other countries where women still can't vote. And there's other countries where it's like the complete opposite and you're forced to vote. For example, where my dad is from, Ecuador, if you do not participate in elections there, you are actually fined and you can't do transactions in the bank. So they're forcing the people there to vote. Because obviously people need to do transactions in the bank and no one wants to get fined. So it's different. But here in the United States, I believe we're privileged when it comes to voting. We all are able to participate now. And we all have that opportunity to express our vote. And as was stated in the video, there was so much trouble about voting. Why? Because it matters. There's a power to it. And so that's why we encourage each person to participate in an election, because every vote does count and every vote does matter. So that's our history. Then we start to talk about some of the things in regards to voting here, particularly in Florida, of course, the United States as well.
Are you taking questions? I'm sorry. Are you taking questions at the end? Like, should I hold them, or do you want to?
I guess we could take a question now
as they go. All right. First one. In the video, it was showing that kind of the way of the future seemed more automated, computers, things like that. Is there any movement in our state currently in that direction? And if so, what precautions would be taken to ensure that there isn't a high level of voter fraud? I mean, if I can vote on my phone, I can hand my phone to Andres.
Right. You're talking about the portion of the video
Yeah,
where it
yeah,
said vote online?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, of course, we don't do that yet. Mr. Doyle, is there any movement on that yet?
No
just
movement?
because of the dangers of it.
And then just, well, that's kind of, I was wondering how they would get around that, but it seems like that's the way it's going to go.
Facial identification.
15 to 20 years, the DOD has researched it, and
That's a good one.
they filed after millions of dollars spent.
So DOD has actually researched that.
Yeah, especially for overseas
wow.
military people
Wow.
to vote online, and they researched it for California has researched it, and they put it off to the side because in order to do it, they'd have to create a complete and separate platform just for elections.
That's wow, interesting. Thank you. And then the other question I had, did you have any thoughts in regards to the constitutionality of the municipalities in California that are allowing non-citizens to vote currently?
My opinion on that?
I mean, you're the supervisor.
Well, in the state of Florida, it's against the law. You cannot, it won't happen.
That's a good answer. Thank you. That'll work.
And that's what we do. We follow the law.
That's the best non-answer I've heard. Not old.
Perfect. Before we move on, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, awesome. Getting back to this, who qualifies to vote in the state of Florida, and this is where we're all pretty familiar with this. This is actually right on the registration application. You have to be a citizen of the United States, a Florida resident, so they ask you for your address, of course. 18 years of age is the legal voting age. You can pre-register at 16 and 17. This is why we are at the schools. We actually, with the high schools, we do a high school voter registration challenge. So we invite all of the high schools to participate, which we soon will be inviting the Bonita Springs High School to participate. And the school that gets the majority of their students registers wins this big high school voter registration challenge trophy, which is actually pretty cool, and the kids start to get into it. And I wish you guys could be there to see what goes on in the classroom. At the start, it seemed like many were hesitant, and I went in with this thinking, because this is how I felt in high school, that nobody cared about voting if you were in high school. Nobody cares. I mean, they're not going to want to vote if you're not offering food at the polls, right? So this is what I was thinking. But as we started to go in there, these high schoolers and those that are getting ready to be of college age do care about voting. They do care about the issues, and I wish you could hear some of the discussions that we have in the high schools. So that was encouraging to me, and I hope it's encouraging to you. So we go over this with them: cannot have been adjudicated mentally incapacitated with respect to voting, and cannot be a convicted felon. And again, these are right on the application. At the top, they ask you, are you a citizen of the United States? Have you been adjudicated mentally incapacitated? And are you a convicted felon? So these are some of the things that they ask you on the form.
Question for you.
Yes, sir.
When the Bull Sharks, the Bonita Bull Sharks, when they finally get to the point where they're able to vote as a body, and if it's a big day, if it's an event, reach out to us, because I'm sure there's some folks in our community who would love to come over there if we could see that, because that's that not only is the high school something that our community has advocated for a very long time, but to actually see this go to fruition through our own high school, I'm sure that at least one or two of us would probably take time off and come up there for that. So
to see them do like a mock election.
Yeah, if they actually do it at Bonita Springs High, we'd love to.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Bonita. Let us know about Bonita.
Does not count.
When it's Bull Sharks time, you call us.
Yes, sir. And that's a great thing.
Okay, good.
And we do bring this whole experience. If you look around the room, we have a DS200. We have the voting booths behind you, and we do design an actual ballot. And so we bring this experience to the high schools. We actually bring it to the elementary school kids and the middle school kids as well. Our hope is that if we start them at a young age, it'll become something that's a habit. It'll become something that they start to like to do and understand the importance of. And we give this same kind of talk, obviously, on their level, because after 5 minutes, you lose the elementary school kids. So we try to keep it to their, we adjust it to them. But here's some of the types of elections that we talk about, and I really try to highlight the primary election and the general election, because many are confused when it comes to the primary election, especially those that move to Florida. They don't understand some of the rules when it comes to the primary election. So the first thing we talk about is the presidential preference primary, and of course it's abbreviated in the PPP. Voters registered in one of Florida's main political parties express their preference for the presidential candidate they would like to see representing their party on the general election ballot. The way I try to summarize it for all of them, because everyone, when they think about elections, they all think about voting for the president, correct? That's what everybody thinks about. So I try to compare it to, obviously, that when it comes to a primary election. And so I try to say, well, if we go back to the 2016 election, were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton the only ones running for president? Of course, the answer is no. And immediately, they all start to shout out who they would have preferred or who was running, and so they start saying all these names. I was like, that's correct. There were other people running for president. So we see that bigger group of people in the primary election. And the way I try to think about it, I equate things to sport. So I think about the primary as the playoffs. There's a bunch of people running. And then I think about the general election. That's when we're like down to the final two. So that's the championship. So that's the comparison I try to make when we're thinking about the primary election and the general election. And then bottom corner, of course, it says an election between two or more candidates in one political party. The candidate with the most votes goes on to the general election. Now, here's where we try to make them understand that Florida is a closed primary election state. So sometimes
when you sit out the second half of the Super Bowl, generally you don't win.
Right.
Say for the second half, you don't win, right?
Correct. Correct.
Ouch.
So here's what we talk about the closed primary election. Florida is a closed primary election state. And so this is the best way that I can compare it to. If there is a candidate that you are desiring to vote for, and that candidate is affiliated with a political party or one of the main political parties, in order to vote for that person in a primary election, you have to affiliate with that party in order to vote for that person. So when you show up to a primary election, and let's say you're registered as a Republican candidate, or as a Republican, not a candidate, but as a Republican, you would receive all the Republican candidates on your ballot if there were those that were running. Or if you're registered as a Democrat, you would receive all the candidates from that party. But if you register as nonpartisan, you would only receive the categories that fall under the nonpartisan category. For example, if there were amendments, you'd be able to vote for those. If there were those that were not affiliated, for example, Lee County Supervisor of Elections, that's on the ballot, you'd be able to vote for the Supervisor of Elections. But if there were a majority of things that were affiliated with parties, you wouldn't be able to vote for those. And this is where we stress the importance of getting registered prior to the book closing. For example, the book closing coming up is July 30th. So you would have to, for the primary election, you have to get in what it is you want to be registered as by July 30th. And if you do not, I'm so sorry, and I've seen people who are upset about it. They show up to the polls, no, I wanted to be this, but they didn't get it changed. So this is why we are out in the community. Hey, we're reminding them, we're giving them materials about it. Hey, this date is coming up. Make sure that you are registered as you want to be, or on that day, you are going to be upset. And then this is also where we take the opportunity and we say, it's so important that we don't just make it about the party, we make it about the person. And so that's what we're teaching the high schoolers. So many people try to say, I'm Democrat, or I'm just hardcore Republican, and I refuse to look at the Democratic candidates. And this is where we encourage them. No, once the candidates are released, do your research. Find out what they're proposing. See how they're doing in the debates. Listen to them, and then make your decision. You could be surprised, and I've heard it before. There are those that are hardcore Republicans, and they see a Democratic candidate that they prefer. So they register as Democrat, and they vote for that person. Or there could be those that are they're hardcore Democrat, but they see a Republican candidate they prefer. And the beauty is, there's no limit to how many times you could switch your party affiliation. You could switch as many times as you want. Just for the election, you got to make sure you get it in by the book closing.
As many times as Jesse switches basketball team.
Wow. You a Laker fan?
I do have but he's had 2 tattoos removed from his left arm because he
not a Laker fan.
Question regarding that: is there a record kept of how many times you switch from one party to the other? There is.
In our system, it keeps track of that.
Yeah, sure it does. Audit of everything in the voter record. You can see every action that was taken.
And that is kept in perpetuity for as long as you're registered to vote. That's interesting.
So my other, I don't know if this is a comment or a question, but one of the things that maybe might also be important for the public to understand is, like, during the primary process, that is your time to select which candidates appear on the ballot that represents your party when it gets closer to the general election. So just during the general election, your options are more limited. Correct. But if you would have participated in the primary process, you would have had more options to select from.
Correct.
So I want people to really understand the primary process and how important it is to select a party and also select the best choices or the ones that you feel more passionate about during that process. So when we get to the general election, you're more comfortable with the choices that you're choosing from.
Correct. Correct.
Mr. Doyle, on Thursday, you had an excellent piece that you handed out that was a great visual where the ballot, the Republican ballot, the Democrat ballot, and the non-party ballot, and you saw how the choices kept shrinking. And that was the same ballot everyone was going to get in August. Yeah,
That was for one precinct. Yes.
Yeah. And that's a great visual. I don't know if you brought some tonight. I would love to scan one and get it.
I left them all with you.
Hey, could you go over briefly what the MPA, the non-political affiliation offices that folks in Bonita will have the opportunity to vote for are?
The school board and judges.
Okay, school board. I was saying that for the benefit of Mr. Chandler, who decided to join us today. Thank you. I know he's running for judge. So judge and school board, for those listening at home, are two NPAs that you will be able to vote in.
One thing I want to add to David's presentation is that, let's take the governor's race right now. There's 33 campaigners. There's many of those are NPAs.
Yeah.
Non-party affiliates. They're not on the primary.
Right.
They go right to the general against the winner of the Republican and Democrat. So in that general election, you're going to see, I think, 11 candidates in the general election.
Wow.
For governor.
Wow.
And I just wanted to make a point here. Jesse, you'll probably remember this, or anybody that has Michigan roots or ties or is a political junkie and paying attention. So where you might think this is unfair in the primary, think of it this way. You had millions and millions of dollars in Michigan going on in 2000 for the presidential primary in Michigan. Al Gore on the Democrat side he either had no opposition or just very token opposition. You had Governor Engler, a Republican of the state, who was very active in the George W. Bush campaign for president. So the Detroit Democrats said, look, our candidate's going to win. Al Gore's going to win. But what it is it's an open primary state. In other words, you can vote Democrat over here, Republican over here, Green Party over here if you want, Independent, Libertarian, whatever you want, as long as you're not voting for this in the same for president, twice. As long as but you can go all through the various positions. So what the Democrats did in 2000 in the state of Michigan, because their candidate Al Gore was going to have basically a free pass, is the Democrats said, and this is no disrespect to Senator McCain, I have a lot of respect for him, but they said just to get to our governor, who they had it with, he had been governor for 12 years at this point, said, let's go vote for Senator McCain. Now, these are hardcore liberal Democrats that would never consider voting for Senator McCain in a general election, but in the primary, enough of them crossed over and handed the state of Michigan to John McCain, other than George W. Bush, just to make the point. Now, I'm sure it's happened the other way in other states, too. But for people that don't like closed primaries, you have to believe this is a very strong reason why they are closed.
Political shenanigans happen when you don't have closed primaries. That's the moral of that story.
One more question regarding when you're talking about your trips to the schools. Do you guys make that visit solo, or are there groups that may have an endorsement card and kids are exposed to?
No, we cannot endorse or participate in any preference of candidates or anything. We're completely nonpartisan.
Okay, very good.
So we don't take anything like that to the presentations.
Very good.
Arguments
I
fire you.
I have a question.
I was just waiting for David when he was going to mention that we make it about the candidate and not the political party, because we serve everyone the same way. As public servant, the supervisor of the elections office, what we do is we serve Republicans, we serve Democrats, we serve everyone the same way, and we want to offer the same respect to every person and every Lee County constituent.
That's great. Thank you.
Have you been into the neighborhood here in Bonita? Because I haven't seen y'all. I haven't seen that in down Rosemary or anything.
When he says the neighborhood, that's Rosemary Park off Old 41. It's a very densely populated, lower income, and underrepresented portion of Bonita Springs.
I would actually have to look into that. We do have a database where we keep track of everywhere that we've been within Bonita or any of the places in Lee County.
That will be a good place to reach out.
Now, we do festivals, for example, but I will take note of that, and I'd like to meet with you afterwards, of course, to get that information and find some places, of course. Right? We'll go anywhere we're invited. So we'd be happy to do that, of course.
I'd be happy to work on that with you if you'd like to do that.
That's the main reason why we're actually doing this.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, because we need to start getting into those areas that we're not.
And sir, I will also travel if you'd like to see my presentation in your
Yes,
in your community.
I work for an organization that we are in the trenches here in Bonita.
Mike won't toot his own horn, but he's part of Cafe of Life. Right?
Yes.
And Cafe of Life is one of the best nonprofits in this entire area, and it serves much of that community that we're talking about today. And it's right in the heart of that area. You're talking, they call it Rosemary Park. It's similar to what Naples Park might be or something like that. But it is, it's in the, you know, I lived in the middle of Rosemary Park for 4 years, so I know what I'm talking about. That is an area that would definitely benefit from some attention. So he's definitely one to get to, and he has a ton of folks who are over there too. So you all should hook up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to give you a business card.
About that, we have been in the Bonita Springs Library twice, and we're going to be there also before the general elections again. The Star Spangle, which was for the celebration of the 4th of July. And we're basically wherever, you know, we get a call and they tell us, hey, can you guys come this day from this time to this time? We're going to have this event or a meeting or something. We're open to that. So it's just visiting the website or just calling the office, and we're going to be there for sure.
Having an event Friday back to school, so maybe y'all may stop by at our park Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Question. How you promote it? For example, you're gonna be in the library. How could people know you are there?
Yeah.
How we promote.
How you promote it? What kind of outlet you using for promoting?
So we use our website. On our website has all of our events that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, but what about if you want to approach more the people? If, for example, I live in Bonita and Estero, and I didn't hear anything, and I didn't know we need more like
reaching out to the
it's not reaching the community.
We publish the events in our website in the calendar, and also we create flyers. Like in the library, I sent it months ago where we're going to be there.
People doesn't go to the libraries. I guess it's my concern is only libraries, and people need to know more about places, how to vote.
We have been trying to get into assisted living facilities also in Bonita Springs. We have been calling places. We tell them we're offering these services. We have a mock collection that we can bring to your group. We have the voter registration drive. And people say, hey, we're going to call you back. We're going to be in touch with you. But we cannot push people and say, like, hey, we're going to be there no matter what at this time. We need to get permission from the people in the different places to be there. Right. That's why we call, we get the outreach to them. But sometimes they just say like, hey, we're going to talk to you, or next time, assisted living facilities, for example, we want to push the vote by mail. And in all the facilities, we have called all of them. Artemis has sent like assisted voting for this year. Only 2 facilities came back and said like, hey, we want to do this with you. Even just voter registration drives
but
to
it's
set
that
them
short
up.
group, I guess. You need to expand it to more media, like
News.
Okay,
let's all right. Hey, time out. Let's say, guys, time out. They're not on trial here. They're here. They're here to help us.
Yeah,
and
that's why.
Fascinating to me. I love it. I really like it when it happens.
I think what
this way.
Mauricio's trying to do
I know.
is...
He's one of my buddies, and he's from Univision, okay? I have tried very hard to push it, okay? And with the Latino community, let's be honest, we're hard to get.
Absolutely.
100%.
We don't like to show up. This is an event that we've been planning for about 2 weeks now, and you don't see anybody from the public. I have people I printed out flyers, and I give them to Mr. Cifredo, and he went kindly around every single store in Bonita Springs to do outreach, to help us, because we're right now in the middle of a process of getting ready for an election, and we're trying to get people registered at the events that we've been welcomed and invited, where we don't have to pay any fees. Because that's the other thing. We serve the public, and as public servant, we gotta be mindful of the fiscal and how we manage our money and our budget.
And I think, listen, one of the things that tonight that's awesome is that we have great connectivity with your office currently. So as things come up from our end, we'll reach out to you. As things come up from your end, you can reach out to us. And we have a third party here too.
And
with
I
Hispanic
welcome
Vote Bank.
that.
So
I was just going to say, the beauty of this presentation to Bonita leaders is that now we are a resource to you.
Correct.
We are a resource to you, and you are a resource to us. But now you know that they have voting booth will travel.
Absolutely.
So if you invite them to your coffee shop, or if you invite them to your school dance gymnasium, they'll show up.
Yeah.
And I will also put on my heels and show up and present my little piece to you too. And that's how we're going to make an impact in our community.
Absolutely.
But we have citizens here that they're educated, but they don't have anybody to talk to or to push them or to, why don't, like you said in one of your presentations, why should I care about what's going on around here?
And
Because
that is
here,
absolutely.
There's nobody from the county or anything like that that's making an impact here in the hood or in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay.
And I totally get it. And this is a conversation I recently had with our supervisor of elections, and understanding the cultural behind the Latino community.
There's a lot of layers there.
Correct. We only see the pig, the top, but we don't see. We don't get to see what's under it.
It's the same way in my culture.
Correct.
Okay.
And that
Same
includes
way.
everyone.
Same way.
Any minority group. Okay? What happens is we have lost faith in the system. And that's a reality. How do you convince someone that's coming from, it's a first generation Latino that's arriving into the US, and you're gonna, okay, you're becoming a citizen, they're all excited, they're all eager to go for it, but they have no idea how the system works. And it's intimidating. When you look at any of our forms, they're so busy. That's it. You lose them immediately.
Yep, no, that's true. And you gotta, to the layers, you think there's folks who are coming from countries where their voice didn't matter.
I'm from Venezuela.
Right. Okay, so you get it. It's a kangaroo court. There's no point in doing it because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. The government always wins.
They don't understand that there's a barrier in understanding that it's different here, and that's part of the gap that hopefully we all together can try to fill on a constant basis until we get where we need to be.
I hate to interrupt, Artemis. As I told you before, passion.
No, I like it.
Okay.
She's one of us. She fits in. I like
if
her.
she'll keep going, I'm going to interrupt her so we can get on with the program.
Okay, let's do that.
I don't know if David finished his, but if you've got any more questions.
Question-wise, do we have any questions from the panel?
Well, I just want to make the one comment that, and once again remind you, and I think Mauricio was kind of getting to that point, that you're always welcome to visit our studios, and you know that you're welcome there anytime, even on a we are a for-profit company, but even on a non-paid basis, you need to knock on our door harder. We had this conversation even with Cafe Life. He's like, oh, why don't you support my events? I'm like, man, because you got to pull my reporter in that direction. I need you to knock on my door a little bit harder. So please do so.
Will do.
Okay.
And we promise to from a city standpoint, we will be in touch. We will be in touch. Yeah. Anybody else? Questions, comments from the panel or the crowd?
Let him finish it up real quick.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Awesome.
He have a question there.
Oh, one in the back.
Well,
Yep, you.
Oh, you.
Go ahead.
I'm a fairly new resident in Bonita Springs.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
The microphone. Okay.
It's so important that we get Hispanics to vote. I don't care how challenging it is. So I'm just telling you guys, because I didn't know that you guys existed. You're an outreach committee of the city. If you want me to go to your neighborhood and talk and knock doors, I'm there, okay? I believe in grassroots efforts, okay? So I would love to talk to you after the meeting, and if we can collaborate in any fashion, okay? We also have Hispanic vote here that can support efforts to get Hispanics to vote, and of course, we had the supervisor for elections. Those are very important resources that we ought to use.
And what's your name, sir?
Sigfredo Hernandez.
Welcome to Bonita Springs.
Awesome. And again, I think that's the beauty of this meeting. If you were to glance at our calendar of events, we are in the community, and we are doing the best that we can. Mr. Doyle is doing the best that he can. Artemis and Juan, we do the best that we can. But again, we are human, and it's not that we purposely plan out, we don't want to go here, and we don't want to go here. We'll go anywhere that a door is open to us. So this is not one of those, like, as was stated, on trial type things. It's one of those, hey, if you have an idea, we're open to it. Come and talk to us, and we are ready. We are ready to do anything that you guys would like us to do. So to continue with the presentation, and it's real short, I promise you, I'll speed it up. We have the runoff primary. Runoff primary election, if no candidate gets a majority of the votes, a runoff is held to decide who should win. And then, of course, as I compared it to, we have the championship, which is the general election. All important elections, and these are the types of elections we try to inform everyone, whether they're high school students or adults. We inform them about these elections. Special elections, the example I give of this is when Barack Obama became president the first time. He, I believe, was a senator at the time. A special election was held to decide who should take his place. So in that case, we would need a special election. Should have been. All righty. The methods of voting. 3 methods of voting here in the state of Florida. You can vote by mail, you can do early voting, election day voting. One that we are pushing for, obviously, is vote by mail, and the requests are coming in, and there are many, many requests to vote by mail. And the beauty about voting by mail, you can do it there's certain advantages to it, I'll say it that way. For example, you could get a vote by mail ballot, you request it, you get it about a month prior to the election. This allows you now an opportunity to look at what is on the ballot, study it. And if you're still one of those people that say, well, I still want to vote in person, you take that vote by mail ballot with you and you surrender it and you vote on the day of the election. Yes, sir.
You do not have to surrender.
Okay, you do not have to surrender it. Correct. All right, so you don't. So even better, this is an opportunity for you to be able to request your vote by mail ballot and then go in and vote anyways. You get it a month prior, because the worst thing to do is to go on the day of the election, which I believe I've done at times, and I go and I don't know anything that was on the ballot, and then the worst thing that you can do is Christmas tree it or eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That's the future of our local elections and things like that. So you don't want to do that. You want to study. You want to be prepared. This allows you to be prepared. So you get it a month prior, and that's the beauty of it. We have early voting, approximately 1 to 2 weeks prior to Election Day, and then there's Election Day voting. Now, the thing that separates these is that Election Day voting is precinct designated. So when you register to vote, you receive a voter information card in the mail. On that card, you have the necessary information that you need to be able to vote, which includes your precinct number. That tells you where you have to vote. But if you choose to vote during early voting, that's not precinct specified. There are specific early voting sites around Lee County, and we do have that information. We have packets with that information. That information is on our website, those places that you can choose from if you would prefer to do early voting. So there are 3 options available to you, and I say take advantage of them. This allows for everyone to at least be able to participate in elections.
What percentage of the people are voting early, by mail, and day of?
65.
Roughly.
65.
Well, in 2016, nearly 50% voted by mail. Wow. It was 176,000 vote by mails were processed, which is the highest in the state of Florida. 30% vote early, and 20% vote on Election Day.
Think of our population, because half these folks aren't here, they're getting it in the mail. So that's a big part of what we got going on. I have a question for you, Supervisor of Election Guy. Dave.
Yes, sir.
Quiz for you. Did you know that there was a federal special election here held in Bonita Springs not too long ago? Do you know who that might be?
Well, it was every precinct except 19 for Trey Rado's place, and Kurt Clausen won.
There we go. He's a Bonita guy. He lives down the road. So
the one quiz that I had. I'm so sorry.
And it cost $1.6 million.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. That's also true.
Perfect.
The election that Trey got elected in 2012, there were people waiting 6 and 8 hours in line to vote. in 2012 also.
Remember?
Wow. That's crazy. Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, if you choose to vote in person, you're going to need an ID. And what they're looking for is a current and valid photo ID and signature. So on our website, we do have the acceptable documents that you are able to bring with you. For example, driver's license is the most easy one that you can bring with you. It has your picture, it has your signature, you are good to go. Of course, there's a list of documents that you can bring with you. If you do not bring one of these with you, you would have to vote a provisional ballot, which of course is basically the same ballot, but it goes into a separate box because the canvassing board now has to look at it to ensure that you are eligible to vote. There's a process that it goes through. So it's better just to have on that day the necessary documents that you need. And again, that information is available on our website. If you see us at an event, feel free to approach our table to find out what it is you need to have with you on the day of the election so that you are able to vote properly.
Where are the provisional ballots counted when you're not in Broward County? Where do they go?
The provisional ballots, they come back to our office Wednesday after the election. They are looked at by a staff member who goes through them and determines if that person was eligible to vote that provisional ballot. If that determined, there's no other action needed, and it goes to the canvassing board, and they approve those ballots that either in bulk or one at a time, depending how many they are. They approve those ballots to be tabulated, and they're tabulated. And then the other ballots that are ineligible, they are also the canvassing board takes a look at them and agrees that they're ineligible, and they are not counted, and a letter is sent to the voter stating why their vote didn't count.
So are they going to, if it's a really, really close election, within 100 votes, something along those lines, are they now going to wait are they going to hold the announcement on the provisionals?
No, because we certify the election, if there's no recounts, Friday after we count the provisional ballots, the election will be certified. See, the Tuesday night's the unofficial results.
Right.
We don't get then we have a second unofficial result, and then we have the official result.
Gotcha.
So it's certified on Friday.
Gotcha. Thank you.
After that, no changes can be made.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I heard you, we're sending people to the website. Is the website available in Spanish too?
Yes.
Very good.
Beautiful. Cool.
Awesome. Well, there we go. Next topic is precincts. There are 127 precincts in Lee County, the thing I'd like to touch on this is, of course, those precincts need workers, poll workers. And so poll workers are very important to what we do, obviously, on the day of the election. They're there bright and early, and they're there the entire time, which ends up being about a 12 to 13-hour day. And they can get paid anywhere between, I believe it's $175 to $250 or $275. So there is a good amount of money to be able to be made, but that's not the only thing. You get the experience of seeing the behind the scenes of voting. You get to see the equipment being set up. You get to see the processes that take place. You do have to go through a 3-hour training class, and we train them thoroughly on what they're going to be doing, each person. So there's an opportunity there to be able to serve our community and help people when it comes to voting. So poll workers, of course, we do carry information. If you are interested, we have a bookmark that contains information. Our website, you can find out how to become a poll worker. We are always looking for people to be able to join the team and help us out with that.
We have a job bank that is available at no charge also, where you can submit the positions, so that you guys know.
Okay, awesome. Awesome, and there's a slide about the poll workers, and then these are just some numbers for you all. We did see this in a previous slide, total registered voters as of today, and then split up into different categories, of course, Republicans, Democrats, other, and then we have the total registered Hispanics and total active Hispanics.
The other is nonpartisan affiliates. If you notice, the number outweighs the Democrats by many.
Yep.
And there's about 2,000 of those are the other minor parties. There's about 7 other recognized minor parties.
Well, thank you guys so much. And prior to leaving tonight, if we could have the supervisor folks, and we could have the Hispanic vote pack folks, and our new Bonitian, if you all could come up here, I'd like to get a picture of the group before we take off.